Welcome to our special program celebrating Redwood City's Sesquicentennial, or as we call it, the 150th celebration, because honestly, no one could say or spell Sesquicentennial. I'm Barbara Pierce, here with co-host Dee Eva. We're the co-chairs of the 150th Celebration Committee. Today, we'd like to take you on a journey about our past and share with you some of the great celebrations and volunteer opportunities coming up this year.
Thanks, Barbara. It's been an exciting year planning for this historic milestone, and I can't wait to share our plans with the community. But before we get into our plans for the present and immediate future, we really should reflect on the illustrious past that brought us here. Our city is known for innovation and diversity, but it didn't start with our generation. Our present is built on generations of Native people, explorers, and immigrants who gave birth to the city we know today. We'll be right back with Mitch Postal from the San Mateo County History Museum and John Schroyer from today's Sotheby's to tell us about the history of Redwood City. Welcome back. We're joined now by Mitch Postal, Executive Director of the San Mateo County Historical Association, which oversees 3 local museums, Woodside Store, Sanchez Adobe, and the San Mateo County History Museum. And John Schroyer from today's Sotheby's, an avid bottle collector and a passionate student of this period in history. Thanks for being here, gentlemen. Mitch, let's start with you. Before Redwood City was incorporated, the earliest inhabitants were the Ohlone, the Spanish explorers and immigrants, and the Mexican government. The first people of what we know Redwood City today as were the Ohlone. Is that true, and can you tell us more about them?
Yes, they were what we call today the Ohlone people. The folks that lived in the Redwood City area would never have called themselves Ohlone, though. They called themselves a local tribe named the Lampshin. And the Lampshin people numbered about 240 individuals who lived between Belmont and the southern part of Redwood City. And we know a lot about them because the original Spanish explorers wrote about them, and also the missionaries took great notes about how rapidly they came into the mission system and what became of them. And so we know quite a bit about the Lampshin people.
That's really interesting. As the Spanish rose to power, it's clear that they impacted the Ohlone. In what other ways did they change Redwood City?
Well, the real impact on what we call the Redwood City area today would have been pretty light, except that the people mostly were moved off the land and brought into the mission system. Between 1777 and 1793, all of the Lampshin people were taken in by the mission. There was, after mission days in Mexican times and early American times, some of the people from the mission came back to live in the Redwood City area, a little bit north of Woodside Road. And they were known for their great fiestas. But by 1859, they were gone and might have moved up the hill to work a sheep ranch up there.
Mm-hmm. Would be interesting to see how they lived. I believe the next chapter in our history involved the Mexican government. Is that right?
Yes. After the Spanish. Mm-hmm.
And what can you tell us about how the government handled things?
So in 1822, Mexico gets its independence from Spain, and one of the promises was secularization of the lands. And many of the former officials of the Spanish regime became new land grant owners. And among those were the Arguello family, who had the 35,000-acre Rancho de las Pulgas, which ran from the southern part of San Mateo all the way down to San Francisco Creek, which included Menlo Park, Redwood City, Belmont, San Carlos. All those communities were all possessed by that one family, the Arguello family.
That's really fascinating. I grew up on the Alameda de las Pulgas, and I understand there's an interesting story about how that got its name?
Well, the Lambshin had a town that they called Connecticut, and that was translated by the Spanish to mean flea village. And that then, when the rancho got its name, one of the original ranch houses was on the site of that village. And so flea stuck with the name of the rancho, and then eventually Alameda de las Pulgas. Because, of course, pulgas is flea in Spanish.
That's really fascinating, Mitch. Barbara?
Let's fast forward now to the period in our history leading up to our incorporation. Here to help us with that is John Schroyer, Realtor with Today Sotheby's. So John, what can you tell us about the early founding fathers of what is now Redwood City?
Well, Barbara, there were a number of them. One of the first was Simon Mezies, who actually helped defend the Arguellos and their land grant of their 35,000 acres. And he was a big part of them getting the legal title to it. But very early on, before that happened, that took many years, there were a lot of folks that ended up here in Redwood City, and they actually squatted on the land. They thought, you know, the land was up for grabs, and until that was settled, they could just take the property. So Mezies, once he did finally get this approved by the Supreme Court, he took it all the way to the Supreme Court, he came and he offered all these squatters that had been on his land. He took Redwood City actually as part of his payment for his, you know, fees, which is pretty incredible. He told the people that were there that, hey, they could buy the land from him. And they didn't like that much. They weren't very happy about the idea that they thought they had this free land in the early days of California. And, but they did. A lot of them bought the land from him. He originally had mapped out Redwood City with the current streets that we have today, and he was going to name it Meziesville. But of course, a lot of the people were angry with him about having to buy the land from him, weren't so keen on that. So it ended up later being known as Redwood City due to the port there, which was before called the Embarcadero. People, as early as the early 50s, Dr. Tripp out in Woodside used to use that. He was one of the first men that actually used it as a port for delivering redwood up to San Francisco. Wow. Yeah. There's also Mr. Diller. The Diller store was one of the earliest buildings still standing in Redwood City on Main Street, and that backed up to the port, which was the creek. And so Diller is a very big name early on in Redwood City's history. But Mezies was the one that kind of really designed and created the town originally.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I've heard that Wyatt Earp actually visited Redwood City. Is that true, or is that an alternative fact?
No, that is true. There's a great photo in a book about the history of Redwood City with him leaning against the bar with his big mustache. And I guess the picture was taken around turn of the century. And but that was the Alhambra Saloon that picture was taken from, which is now, I believe, Martin's West. I believe that's the restaurant today. It's the same building, but with a saloon in it. And so, yeah, he was one of many that made their way through Redwood City on their way, because I believe he lived up in San Francisco. Not 100% sure of that, but Redwood City was full of saloons. You know where the Main and Broadway, where the Barron Bank is, the San Mateo County Bank, the first building built there was called the Snug Saloon. And there were many. There was the Arbor Saloon, there was the Eagle Saloon. There were also many breweries in town. Well, two in particular. One was the Eureka Brewery, which was right where the Hotel Sequoia is now. Okay. And that was known as Eureka Corners. And they moved up the street later, and then they built the hotel. But then my favorite brewery is the Pioneer Brewery, where the Michael Chris brewed his beer. And that was just south of 5 Points, Woodside Road in El Camino. So San Francisco, you know, a lot of people came down from there, but that was the big drinking town. But Redwood City was a big working class group of fellows, and they needed their beer.
Well, I suppose if it was a seaport, there were a lot of folks coming in and out, and they had to have things to do during the evening, and so the 19 saloons on Main Street were important.
That's right.
You know, as I've learned about Redwood City's history, I was really struck by the stories of the immigrants who built their lives here. Do you have some interesting stories, either John or Mitch, about these people?
Well, I mean, there are quite a few. You know, early on, there was a number of tanneries here. There were two in particular. There was S.H. Frank Tannery, which was out in Redwood City, just on the other side of Veterans now, which is where it was. And there was Beeger's Tannery. And Beeger's was on El Camino, where Town Ford is now. But there were all kinds of industries here. There was, you know, obviously there was the Morgan oyster beds that were out in the bay. And that was a big industry here. And a lot of the immigrants that came to our area started these. Of course, the Germans with the breweries. And there was the people that owned Eureka Brewery was Carl and Henry Plump. And great name, but yes, there were immigrants that really just started all the industries here, came from all over the world.
Right.
It's interesting that many of the groups would attach themselves to a particular industry. And the Chinese that were at today's port, actually just across the channel from the port, they were shrimp fishermen. And at one point on the West Coast, 25% of all the shrimp consumed on the West Coast came from shrimp camps off of San Mateo County. So they've made a real contribution to the local economy, and sort of a little-known story.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I think the most fun has been learning these really interesting vignettes as we've evolved through the Sesquicentennial. You know, Redwood City has evolved into a community with a number of different neighborhoods. What can you tell us about them and about the developers who created them?
Sure. Well, early on, as the city was growing, initially, the out of bounds really was Veterans Boulevard. Everything on the other side of Veterans was just the bay. And so there are some really great aerial photos of Redwood City in those days, well, later days, but that show that the outline was just really downtown. It wasn't beyond that. But most of the development was from Woodside Road all the way up to Broadway, and then north up to close to where Brewster is, and then Veterans was the extremity there. But as time went on, they did expand. The first development west of El Camino was done, it's known as Wellesley Park. We all know it now as Edgewood Park. That was subdivided in the late 1880s, 1889. Other subdivisions started later. But who started the Wellesley Park was the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. They actually they were trying to create this enclave for their members. And then around turn of the century, what we now know as Mount Carmel area, we typically don't call it this, but it was known as Dingy Park. And the Dingy family lived where actually Sequoia High School is now. And they bought that property at some point from Horace Haas' family, who owned it originally. But Dingy Park is what we know now as Mount Carmel. It wasn't until later that it even went further west up into the Emerald Hills area. That was developed in the 1920s. And then, of course, we all kind of know, the locals know the area called Farm Hill Estates. That was kind of done in the 50s, 1950s. But really west of El Camino were mostly farms up until that time, and it just expanded slowly from 1890s all the way through the 50s until now. It's still, still potentially growing a little bit here and there.
Thank you, John and Mitch. Fascinating stories. I'm sure we could talk for hours about other fascinating aspects of Redwood City's history. Next up is Derek Wolfgram, Redwood City Library Director, and Chris Beth, Director of Parks and Rec, to talk about the upcoming festivities.
Thank you, Barbara. There are a lot of events and activities coming online to celebrate the Sesquicentennial this year. The main event is the 150th anniversary celebration, the Festival and Flower Extravaganza, which takes place on May 20th at Courthouse Square. Here to talk about the festival and other events to celebrate our Sesquicentennial is the Director of Parks and Recreation Community Services for Redwood City, Chris Beth.
All right, thank
Hi,
you, Derek.
Chris. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Derek. Now, we're super excited about the festival this year. So, as you know, Redwood City is known for putting on great events throughout the year. We have an awesome opportunity to really highlight Redwood City's history with the 150th Festival and Flower Extravaganza. It's going to be really phenomenal. The event's going to be from noon to 9 on Saturday, May 20th. And I would call it's like a taste of all Redwood City events that we have throughout the year. There's going to be multiple stages for music. We're going to have dancing. Of course, we have the art and flower show. That's curated for this particular event, which is really great. For those that have been to the Salsa Festival, you know, we have the salsa tasting. Well, we have created a new food competition, and it's the chicken wing competition.
Nice.
So we have, I think, already a dozen who have registered for the chicken wing competition. So to highlight the great sauces and mixes and everything else for the public to try and to judge. So that's going to be really cool. There is a car show. There's a historic fashion show. And we're going to be all throughout the downtown, and it's going to be really exciting.
It sounds like a great event. It sounds like there's going to be something for everyone there. I've heard another big event to look out for is the 4th of July parade this year, which is already an iconic celebration, but this year is adding a special element of the celebration of Redwood City's 150th anniversary, and is also special because it will be the first appearance of the newly crowned Miss California.
Yeah, I've heard that. If you don't know, and if anybody doesn't know, the Peninsula Celebration Association has been hosting the annual 4th of July parade since 1939, which is really significant. Wow. So the 78th year, and of course they are partnering with our committee and the city to have the theme of the 150th anniversary for Redwood City. So they are specifically looking for entries and floats that will highlight Redwood City's history and celebrate its diversity in neighborhoods. And so that's going to be very exciting. So if anybody's interested in joining the parade and being involved in that and creating a great float that reflects the history, you can go to parade.org. And Bob Slusser is actually going to be offering his support and advice to people, so you don't feel like you have to do it all alone. And that's a great way to be connected and to join in a great parade.
Well, in addition to those two big events that we have, are there other things that are coming up between now and the next few months?
Yeah, well, I should also mention with the 150th event, there's also a light show, okay? So I'm saying adding the light show to the May 20th event and to mention what you just asked, because the 150th light show is actually happening on Tuesday evenings down the Courthouse Square now. So if you go to our city's website, you can actually check the schedule, but we're going to be showing that 150th light show on the May 20th event as well. There's some really cool, significant things coming up between now and later this summer. So on May 27th at 10:30, we're going to have the historic downtown walk, which is really cool. May 29th, the Memorial Day event is going to be at the historic Union Cemetery, and that's an annual event. But again, in celebrating our history, it's going to be even more significant this year. We're going to have a wonderful Fun in the Park activity on Saturday, June 3rd, and that would be at Hoover Park. So we're going to have free food, free activities for kids. We're going to actually have a free swim day at Hoover Pool as well. So the entire community is welcome to come. Of course, we're going to be having different park activities throughout Redwood City through the summer. And so in addition to Hoover Park on June 3rd, we are going to be having a Park Fun in the Park event on Wednesday, July 12th at Stafford Park. And then we're also having one later in August at Marlin Park for our Music in the Park series. So we're pretty excited about that. There's so many things. I have to look at my notes because there's a speakers event on June 10th at the History Museum. We're going to be looking at an overnight family fun campout at Red Morton Park on July 27th and 28th. So there's lots of activities throughout the year, and there's lots of ways for people to participate.
Well, that sounds great. I know that there are also some other pieces related to a photo contest that the city is sponsoring and some other photo-related events that are going on.
Yes, so I understand there are two of them. There's Redwood City 150 Faces of Our Community. Mm-hmm. So that is happening right now. You can go to redwoodcityhistory.org or redwoodcity150.org redwoodcity.org, and you can check out how to be involved in that. And there's also Redwood City Then and Now photo program where we want to get the community engaged. You can also go to the website for information.
It sounds like a lot of fantastic opportunities to get engaged. Yep. And next we have Sarah LaTorra will be joining us from the Redwood City Public Library to talk about the Redwood City Now and Then photo project. Joining us now is Sarah LaTorra from the Redwood City Public Library to tell us about the Redwood City Now and Then photo project that has been underway at the library. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Thank you.
So can you tell me a little bit about this project, how it came about, and what the library hoped to accomplish with it?
Sure. So the library applied for a grant, and this grant, the intention was to foster positive relationships between generations and specifically to engage seniors and teens in a project. And we decided to do a photography project because both teens and seniors love photography, and it's a great way to share stories and talk to each other.
So what sort of events and activities have there been as part of this project?
So we've had both photo sharing events as well as technology events. And the intent was that the seniors could learn about the teens and see what the teens are really good at technology-wise. And then the teens could learn from seniors and kind of hear their stories and just gain a knowledge of each other.
So as you've heard the stories that people have had to share, have there been any favorites or anything really interesting that's come out of those discussions?
Definitely. I have quite a few of them. So one of them I wanted to tell you about is this gentleman. Back in 1967, he moved to Redwood City, and he's from Illinois, and he really loves swimming. And so they got a membership at the Emerald Lake Club, and they would go up to the lake all the time to swim. He said that to be able to swim all over the lake by yourself, you had to pass a swim test. So you had to be able to go back and forth 4 times and then tread water for 10 minutes. What he loved about going swimming up there was that generally the kids would all bike up from their houses and they'd get there and it was just all kids. Even the lifeguards were high school students. So it was just kind of a fun environment to be in. He was telling us how there was this big swing that you'd climb up to the top and then you'd hold on to it and you'd swing out over the lake and then hopefully you'd jump off at the right time and you'd dive into the water. However, what usually ended up happening is people would slip and swing back and fall, and so eventually they had to take that out of the lake. So not sure if I'd want my kids to do that unsupervised, but that's okay.
Definitely a picture of another time in Redwood City's history.
Definitely.
Are there any other stories that you came across in your research and preparation for the project?
Yeah, so we focused on the airport, which was in Redwood City from about 1916 to the mid-1930s, which is not a very long time. What I found looking at newspaper articles was that men were often portrayed as being very brave, learning to fly, going up high, versus the women, they only made the newspaper if they did something wrong. So one story I found says, Aviatrix wrecks plane against cow, Madeira, Mercury. Miss Hope Curvin, local girl who recently joined the Christopherson Aviation School at Redwood City to qualify as a member of the proposed women's military aero squad of Miss George French Shelton, narrowly escaped serious injury yesterday when she wrecked the school military tractor aeroplane in a collision with a cow. The cow exercised the prerogative of her sex and changed her mind when it came to getting out of the aviatrix way. The damage to the military tractor is $1,000.
Wow. A picture of a whole other time.
Definitely.
So, well, it sounds like this has been a great opportunity for people to learn about each other and learn about technology and learn about Redwood City's history, all as part of the Sesquicentennial. It just seems like it's been fantastic. So thank you for your work on it, and thank you for being here to tell us about it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now we'll head back to Dee and Barbara for learning about opportunities to volunteer and get involved in the Sesquicentennial celebration events for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Derek. We still need volunteers for several events. People can sign up by going to our website, rwc150.org, or by emailing us at d@rwc150.org or barbara@rwc150.org. And we'll be right back with how you can be a part of this 150th celebration.
Wow, it's been quite a year so far. And it's wonderful to have so many people from throughout our community volunteering their time to help us plan these events. I want to thank them for all their hard work.
I also want to thank the over 50 sponsors who helped make this possible for us and make most of the activities free to the community. These include our host and major sponsor, the City of Redwood City, presenting sponsors Wells Fargo and Redwood City Improvement Association, the Platinum Plus sponsor San Mateo Credit Union, and our Platinum sponsors Cargill, Dignity Health Sequoia Hospital, Dostart Development Company, Kaiser Permanente, Redwood City Parks and Arts Foundation, PG&E, the Port of Redwood City, and Ropers, Majeski, Cone, and Bentley, plus the numerous gold and silver sponsors seen here.
We still have volunteer opportunities, don't we, Dee? How can people sign up?
We've made it really easy for them to sign up. If they just go to our website, rwc150.org, and find the place that says volunteer. And there's so much there, too, a calendar of events and 4 contests where people can get involved.
Well, Dee, I can see that the exciting commemorative magazine has come out. Can you tell us about it?
I sure can. We wanted something lasting to commemorate this landmark year for Redwood City, and what better way to do that than to have a magazine of Redwood City history. To accomplish that, we asked Janet McGovern, a former newspaper reporter and history writer, to handle the project. Yes, we're really excited about this magazine, Redwood City 150. As you can see, it's a glossy, full-color, 140-page magazine, chock full of interesting stories about Redwood City history from our beginning to the present. The stories were written by an all-volunteer team of local historians, writers, editors, as well as local residents. And there are loads of pictures from local photographers, too.
And it's available now, but where can people buy it?
Yes, it's available now. We've printed 40,000 copies, and thanks to the support of advertisers and sponsors, the publication is free. They'll be at the huge 150th Festival and Flower Extravaganza at Courthouse Square on Saturday, May 20th, from noon to 9 p.m. And at other events throughout the year, including stores and coffee shops and other locations where Climate Magazine is normally available. And check at City Hall, the libraries, and the parks buildings, too.
Well, thank you, Dee. It's been a delight to co-chair the 150th celebrations with you.
It's been my pleasure.
It's an exciting time for Redwood City. I hope you've all learned a lot today about our history, exciting events and activities coming up, and volunteer opportunities.
Once again, you can learn more about our history and the 150th celebration activities at redwoodcityhistory.org. And you can find out about community input contests and volunteering through the year at rwc150.org.
So thank you all so much for being with us today, and we hope you'll join us in the festivities for this special milestone in our history, Redwood City's Sesquicentennial.